The morning silence in the Rodriguez mansion was absolute. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes with contentment, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a house that had forgotten how to breathe. The kind of silence that made even footsteps feel like an intrusion. Then it shattered. Ma, 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 ma. Michael Rodriguez stopped mid-stride in the hallway, his Italian leather briefcase sliding from his fingers. It hit the Persian rug with a muted thud, but he barely heard it. Every cell in his body had frozen, his mind refusing to process what his ears had just captured. That sound. That impossibly small, fragile sound. His heart hammered against his ribs as he turned slowly toward the nursery. The door stood half open, golden morning light spilling across the threshold. He took a step forward, then another, moving like a man walking through water. Everything slowed down and surreal. What he saw through that doorway would be burned into his memory forever. Jerry and Jamie, his 2-year-old twin sons, who had never spoken, never walked, never responded to their own names, were sitting on the plush, cream-colored rug. Their bodies, usually rigid and unresponsive, were angled toward someone. Their eyes, typically vacant and unfocused, were locked with laser precision on the woman kneeling before them. Grace Thompson, the maid he'd hired 3 weeks ago and barely noticed since. She was still in her crisp black and white uniform, those bright yellow cleaning gloves on her hands, looking almost comical in the tender scene before him. Both her arms were stretched toward the boys, her palms open, inviting. Her face, he'd never really looked at her face before, was radiant with something he couldn't name. Hope? Love? Faith? "It's okay, my sweet boys," she whispered, her voice carrying a tremor of emotion. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Michael's throat constricted. He pressed himself against the wall, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that any sound from him would break whatever spell had been cast in that room. Ma, 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 ma. There it was again. Jamie this time. His mouth forming the syllables with painstaking effort, his whole face scrunched in concentration. A thin line of drool escaped the corner of his lip, but his eyes, God, his eyes were alive in a way Michael had never seen. "Yes, baby. Yes." Grace's voice cracked with joy. "That's right. Say it again, sweetheart." Jerry's small hand lifted, trembling with the effort. It moved maybe 2 inches before dropping back to his lap, but the intention was clear. He was reaching for her. Michael felt his knees weaken. His sons, the boys, every specialist in America had written off. The children whose medical files used words like severe impairment and minimal cognitive response were speaking, moving, responding to her, not to him, not to the army of nurses and therapists he'd hired, not to the millions of dollars worth of equipment that filled the west wing of his home, to a maid who earned $18 an hour and wore yellow dishwashing gloves. The realization hit him like a physical blow. For 2 years, he had moved heaven and earth to help his sons. He'd consulted with specialists from Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic. He'd flown in a renowned pediatric neurologist from Switzerland. He'd spent more money on experimental treatments than most people earn in a lifetime. And yet this young woman, kneeling on his floor in her cleaning uniform, had accomplished what they all said was impossible. "Come on, Jerry," Grace coaxed softly. "I know you can do it too. Take your time. There's no rush." Michael watched as Jerry's mouth opened, then closed, opened again. His small chest heaved with effort. The sound was barely audible. Ma. Tears blurred Michael's vision. His hand flew to his mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. These were the boys Melissa had died, bringing into the world. The sons he'd held in the NICU, so small and fragile, fighting for every breath. The children, he'd been told, would never call him Daddy, would never tell him they loved him, would never speak at all. And now they were speaking. Grace gathered both boys closer, careful of their fragile bodies, and they leaned into her touch. The trust in their posture was absolute. Jamie's head found the curve of her shoulder. Jerry's fingers clutched at her sleeve. Michael backed away from the door as silently as he'd approached, his heart thundering so loudly he was sure they'd hear it. He made it to his home office before his legs gave out, collapsing into the leather chair behind his mahogany desk. The word echoed in his mind. Mama, not Dada, not even his name. They'd called her Mama. He should feel angry, he thought distantly. He should feel betrayed or replaced, but all he felt was a crushing mixture of grief and gratitude, so intense it hurt to breathe. His sons had voices. After 2 years of silence so complete, it had nearly driven him mad. His boys had found their voices. Michael leaned back, staring at the coffered ceiling of his office, seeing nothing. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the room, but he felt cold and confused and shattered in a way he couldn't begin to articulate. When Melissa was alive, this house had music. She'd sing while cooking breakfast, her voice carrying up the grand staircase. She'd dance through these hallways, pulling him into spontaneous waltzes when a song she loved came on. She'd hummed constantly during her pregnancy, her hands on her swelling belly, talking to the babies as if they could already hear her. After she died, after he'd watched the light leave her eyes in that sterile hospital room, after he'd signed papers and made arrangements, and somehow kept breathing even though his soul felt ripped in half, he'd shut it all down. The music stopped. The laughter ceased. He'd packed away her things, locked up his grief, and built walls of routine and control so high that nothing could hurt him again. But he'd built those walls around his sons, too. He'd given them the best medical care money could buy. But had he given them himself? Had he given them presence, connection, love without conditions? Michael pulled open his desk drawer and withdrew a small photo he kept hidden there. Melissa, 7 months pregnant, glowing in a yellow sundress, standing in the garden she'd designed. Her hand rested on her belly, her smile radiant. He'd taken this picture on a Sunday afternoon, just 6 weeks before everything fell apart. "I don't know what to do," he whispered to the photograph. "Melissa, I don't know how this happened. I don't know what she's doing that I couldn't do." The house remained silent, offering no answers. He sat there for a long time, the photograph trembling in his hands, one thought circling his mind like a prayer or a curse. Tomorrow, he would get answers. Tomorrow, he would understand. Tomorrow, he would figure out how a stranger had reached his sons when their own father couldn't. He didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would change everything he thought he understood about healing, about love, and about what it truly means to be a father. I know many of you watching this are parents yourselves, or maybe you know someone whose child faces challenges that seem insurmountable. Before we continue with Michael's story, I want to ask, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. Are you watching from Nigeria, the United States, the UK? I love knowing that these stories connect us across continents. And stick with me, because what happens next will show you that miracles don't always look the way we expect them to. Michael had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. His sons' faces alive with expression, their mouths forming that word, Mama. The sound had played on an endless loop in his mind all night, mixed with memories he'd tried so hard to bury. The morning came gray and reluctant, heavy clouds pressing down on the Texas sky. Rain tapped against the windows of the master bedroom, each drop a small accusation, He'd built this room to be a sanctuary premium, blackout curtains, temperature control, a mattress that cost more than a used car, but no amount of money could buy him peace. He showered in water too hot, dressed in a suit too expensive, and walked down hallways too empty. The house staff moved like shadows, trained to be invisible. That's what he'd wanted. Order, control, silence. He'd gotten exactly what he asked for. In the dining room, Maria had laid out breakfast, fresh fruit, whole grain toast, eggs prepared exactly how he liked them. He sat alone at a table that could seat 16, staring at food he couldn't taste. "Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez." Grace's voice came from the doorway. Soft, but clear. She carried a stack of fresh linens, her uniform pristine despite the early hour. "May I refill your coffee?" He looked up, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since he'd hired her. She was younger than he'd registered, mid-20s, maybe. Her dark skin held a warmth that seemed to glow against the stark white of her apron. Her eyes, when they briefly met his, were kind but cautious. She knew how to read a room, how to gauge a mood. "That was clear, Grace." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Sit down, please." She hesitated, surprise flashing across her features. Staff didn't sit with him. Ever. It wasn't that kind of household. "Sir, I have." "Sit." It wasn't a command, though. It was something closer to a plea. She set down the linens carefully and perched on the edge of the chair across from him, hands folded in her lap, waiting. Michael didn't know where to start. His fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, buying time. "I saw what happened yesterday," he finally said, "in the nursery." Her posture didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Understanding. "I heard them speak," he continued, each word careful and measured. "My sons, who have never spoken before, who every doctor in this country told me would never speak. I heard them say," he paused, swallowing hard, "they called you Mama." Grace's hands tightened in her lap, but her voice remained steady.
"Yes, sir. They've been trying for a few days now. Yesterday was the first time they got the whole word out."
"How?" The question burst from him, raw and desperate. "How did you do it?" She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "I didn't do anything special, Mr. Rodriguez. I talked to them. Every day, all day. I read them stories. Even though people said they couldn't understand, I sang to them, even though they couldn't sing back. I held their hands when they seemed scared, touched their faces so they'd know they weren't alone." She paused. "I treated them like children who could feel everything, even if they couldn't show it." The simplicity of her answer gutted him. "That's it? You just talk to them?" "I love them, sir." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Not as a job, not as a task on a checklist. I love them because they deserve to be loved. Because every child knows when someone sees them, really sees them, versus when someone is just looking through them." Michael felt something crack inside his chest. "I see them," he said hoarsely. "They're my sons. I see them every day." "Do you?" Grace's question was gentle, not accusatory, but it cut deeper than any blade. "Or do you see their condition, their diagnosis, the tragedy of what they can't do, instead of the miracle of who they are?" He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, because she was right. God help him, she was right. For 2 years, every time he looked at Jerry and Jamie, all he saw was failure. The failure of medicine to fix them. The failure of his money to solve the problem. His own failure to protect Melissa. To save her. To give his sons the mother they deserved. He'd never just seen them. "I spent millions." he said quietly, staring into his coffee. Millions of dollars on the best care in the world. Money can't buy what they needed most, sir. It can't buy presents. It can't buy someone who shows up not because they're paid to, but because they choose to. Children don't need perfection. They need someone who doesn't give up on them. The words hit like stones against glass, each one creating another crack in the carefully constructed walls he'd built. Michael stood abruptly, the chair scraping against marble. He walked to the windows, overlooking the grounds. The rain had intensified, turning the manicured gardens into a watercolor blur. Somewhere out there were the swings Melissa had picked out, still in their boxes. The sandbox she'd designed, never filled. The treehouse she'd sketched plans for, never built. My wife died giving birth to them, he heard himself say. Did you know that? Yes, sir. The other staff mentioned it. She was a pediatric nurse. She worked with sick children, loved every one of them like they were her own. His voice cracked. It's not fair that she's gone, and I'm the one here who doesn't know what the hell he's doing. You're doing the best you can, Mr. Rodriguez. Am I? He turned to face her, his eyes burning. Because it seems like the best I can do isn't anywhere close to good enough. My children are calling someone else mama, someone I hired to clean bathrooms. If Grace was offended, she didn't show it. They're not calling me mama because they've replaced their mother, sir. They're calling me that because it's the first word they could form, and it's what they associate with comfort, with safety, with being cared for. She stood, meeting his gaze evenly. But they want you too. They need you. I see the way they track you when you walk by, the way they get quiet when they hear your voice. They're waiting for you to reach back. I don't know how. The admission cost him. Michael Rodriguez, who'd built a billion-dollar empire, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals, didn't know how to connect with his own children. You start by showing up, Grace said simply, not as the man who's trying to fix them, but as their father who loves them exactly as they are. You start by sitting on the floor with them, by reading them stories, by letting them know that you're not going anywhere. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed on the table, a reminder about a board meeting in an hour, the real world, demanding his attention, the empire that needed running, the company that had been his refuge from grief for 2 years. He looked at the phone, then at Grace. I have to go to work, he said. Something passed over her face, not judgment, exactly, but maybe disappointment. Of course, sir. She collected her linens and left the room, her footsteps soft on marble. Michael stayed at the window, watching rain streak down the glass. He thought about Jerry and Jamie, 2 floors above him, probably awake by now. He thought about how many mornings he'd left without checking on them, telling himself they were in good hands with the nurses. He thought about how he'd built an empire but couldn't build a connection with his own children. He thought about Melissa, who would have known exactly what to do, who would have filled this house with warmth and music and laughter, who had loved so freely, so completely, without walls or conditions. And he thought about Grace, a woman he'd barely noticed, who had somehow done what all his money and power and desperation couldn't do. She'd given his sons their voices back. The question was, would he finally learn to listen? Many of you are probably feeling what Michael's feeling right now, that ache of realizing we might be missing what matters most while chasing what we think matters. I want to hear from you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Drop your number in the comments and tell me, are you invested in what happens next? Because I promise you, the next chapter is going to reveal something that changes everything. Grace Thompson had learned to be invisible long before she came to work at the Rodriguez mansion. It was a skill she'd inherited from her mother, passed down like a family recipe or a treasured heirloom. Be quiet. Be efficient. Don't make waves. Do your job. and disappear. But that was before she met Jerry and Jamie. 3 weeks earlier, she'd stepped through the towering front doors of the estate with one small suitcase and a heart heavy with her own hidden grief. The agency had called it a premium placement, high pay, private quarters, working for one of Texas's wealthiest families. Most of her colleagues would have killed for this position. Grace had taken it because she needed the money, and because she needed to disappear. That first day, walking through hallways lined with art worth more than she'd make in a lifetime, she'd felt the familiar weight of invisibility settle over her shoulders like a cloak. The other staff barely looked at her. Mr. Rodriguez hadn't looked at her at all during the brief interview. She was hired to clean, to maintain, to be another cog in the well-oiled machine of luxury. But then she'd seen the nursery. She'd been given a tour by Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, a stern woman with efficient movements and little warmth. The twins' rooms are off-limits, except for scheduled cleaning. Mrs. Chen had explained, keys jingling at her belt. They have round-the-clock medical care. The nurses handle everything. You don't need to worry about them. But Grace had worried anyway, because when Mrs. Chen opened that door, Grace saw something that made her chest tighten with an old, familiar ache. 2 small boys in specialized medical chairs, positioned by a window overlooking gardens they'd never explored. Equipment everywhere, monitors, therapy devices, safety padding. The room was immaculate, perfectly organized, more like a high-end hospital than a child's bedroom. There were toys on shelves, but they looked untouched, still in packaging. Books stacked neatly, spines uncracked. And the boys themselves, Jerry and Jamie, she'd later learn their names, sat motionless, their eyes tracking across the ceiling as if watching something no one else could see. Poor things, Mrs. Chen had said matter-of-factly. Born with severe disabilities. The mother died in childbirth. Tragic situation all around. Mr. Found. Rodriguez spares no expense on their care, though. The best nurses, the best equipment. Grace had nodded, but her eyes stayed on the children. She saw what Mrs. Chen didn't see, the slight tension in Jamie's shoulders, as if he was waiting for something. The way Jerry's fingers twitched when voices echoed from the hallway. They weren't blank canvases. They were trapped inside bodies that wouldn't cooperate, surrounded by sterile care that never touched their souls. She knew that feeling. She'd spent her whole childhood watching her mother be invisible, and feeling invisible herself. That night, alone in her small quarters on the 3rd floor, Grace had made a decision. Tomorrow, she'd do her job. She'd clean and organize and be professional. But she'd also do something more. She'd see them. The next morning, after Mrs. Chen left for her day off, Grace went to the nursery. The day nurse was on her break, and the twins were alone. She knocked softly, even though she knew they couldn't respond, and pushed the door open. "Good morning," she said quietly, approaching the boys. "My name is Grace. I'm new here, and I wanted to introduce myself properly." Neither boy moved, but Jamie's eyes shifted slightly in her direction. Grace pulled up a small ottoman and sat at their level. She didn't reach for them, didn't try to touch or adjust or fix anything. She just sat there, present. "I don't know if anyone's told you this," she continued, her voice soft, "but you two are beautiful. And I don't mean that the way people mean when they feel sorry for someone. I mean really beautiful. Look at those eyes, they're the color of honey in sunlight. And your faces, you look like your mama." I saw her picture in the hallway. She must have been something special. Jerry's fingers twitched again. "I'm going to be working here for a while," Grace went on. "Cleaning, mostly. But I was thinking, if it's okay with you boys, maybe I could spend some time here when I'm done with my work. I could read you stories, or just talk. Tell you about my day, about what's happening in the world outside these windows. She paused, listening. The house was so quiet. Even the nurses moved through like ghosts, performing tasks with clinical efficiency but little warmth. I bet it gets lonely, she whispered. I bet sometimes you wish someone would just sit with you, and not because they have to, but because they want to. That's how it started. Every day, after finishing her assigned duties, Grace would slip into the nursery. At first for 15 minutes, then 30, then an hour. She'd sit on the floor, back against the wall, and talk. She told them about growing up in a small apartment in Dallas, about her mother who worked 3 jobs and still found time to braid Grace's hair every Sunday. She read them books from the untouched shelves, not baby books, but real stories. Chronicles of Narnia, Charlotte's Web, Harry Potter. Stories about children who were different, who had challenges, who found their way despite everything. Don't listen to what people say you can't do, she'd tell them. You listen to what's inside you. That voice that nobody else can hear. That's the truth. The nurses noticed her presence, but said nothing. What harm could it do? The boys couldn't understand anyway. That's what the doctors said. Minimal cognitive response, limited awareness. But Grace saw things the doctors missed. The way Jamie's breathing changed when she started reading. The way Jerry's eyes followed her movements. The tiny muscled twitches that looked random but seemed to come when she said certain words. 3 weeks in, she made her greatest discovery. She'd been cleaning behind a built-in bookshelf, a thorough job Mrs. Chen had assigned, when her hand brushed against something wedged in the back. She pulled out a brown leather notebook, worn at the edges, pages softened by time and touch. Grace opened it carefully. The handwriting inside was elegant, looping blue ink that spoke of someone who took time with words. Melissa Rodriguez was written inside the front cover. Notes for my baby boys. Grace's hands trembled as she turned the pages. Recipes for homemade baby food. Tips for soothing colicky babies. Lists of first words to teach them. And Song's original lullabies with notes and lyrics written out in careful detail. One page stopped her cold. If anything ever happens to me, and I pray it doesn't, but a nurse's mind always goes to worst-case scenarios. I want whoever cares for Jerry and Jamie to know this. They will understand more than people give them credit for. Talk to them like they can hear you, because they can. Love them like they can feel it, because they will. And when you think they can't respond, remember that love can still reach them, even when words cannot. I've felt them kick in my womb when I sing. They know my voice. They know love. Don't let anyone tell you they don't. Grace had sat there for a long time, tears streaming down her face, holding the words of a woman she'd never met but somehow understood completely. That night, she sang the lullabies from the notebook, songs Melissa had written for sons she'd never see grow up. Hush now, my darlings. Mama's voice is near. Even in darkness, you'll know I'm here. In every whisper of wind, every ray of sun, my love surrounds you, my precious ones. Jamie had made a sound that night. Just a small exhalation, barely noticeable. But Grace had noticed. You hear your mama, don't you? She whispered. She's still here. She left you these songs, these words. She's still reaching for you. Day by day, week by week, something shifted. The boys began to respond, tiny movements at first, then more. A finger tap, an eye focus, a mouth movement that looked almost like the beginning of a smile. Grace didn't tell anyone. She was afraid they'd stop her, call it wishful thinking, remind her of her place. She was just the cleaning lady. What did she know about medical conditions and developmental delays? But she knew love, and she knew presence. And she knew that sometimes the most profound healing happens not in hospitals and therapy sessions, but in quiet moments when someone chooses to stay. Yesterday morning, she'd been singing that lullaby when it happened. Jamie's mouth had opened. Sounds formed in his throat, awkward, broken, but deliberate. "Ma," he'd breathed. Grace's heart had nearly stopped. "Jamie? Baby, are you trying to talk?" "Ma, Ma." Then Jerry, not wanting to be left behind, had made the same sounds. Grace had gathered them both as close as their fragile bodies allowed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, my babies. Yes, you can do it. You can speak." She hadn't known Mr. Rodriguez was standing in the hallway, hadn't realized he'd witnessed it all. Now, 3 days after that confrontation in the dining room, Grace moved through the mansion with her usual efficiency, but her mind was elsewhere. She'd seen something in Michael Rodriguez's eyes that morning, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the grief he carried. He reminded her of her mother in those last years before she died, working so hard to provide, to protect, to control the uncontrollable, but missing the simple truth that children don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. As she folded laundry in the utility room, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, purposeful. She glanced up to see Michael standing in the doorway, still in his suit from the office. But his tie was loosened and his hair was disheveled. "Where are they?" he asked without preamble. "The boys? They're in the nursery with Nurse Patricia." He nodded, then seemed to struggle with something. "Will you—" he cleared his throat. "Will you show me what you do with them?" Grace set down the pillowcase she'd been folding, her heart suddenly racing. "Of course, Mr. Rodriguez." She led him upstairs, to the nursery, to his sons. And for the first time in 2 years, Michael Rodriguez didn't just look at his children. He really saw them. Before we continue, I need to know something from you. This story is touching hearts around the world, but I want to hear your voice. In the comments, tell me, have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever been the person who saw someone when everyone else looked away? Share your experience. Your story matters. And if you're finding meaning in this journey, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this all unfolds. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens next. Michael Rodriguez stood in the doorway of the nursery, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt like an intruder in his own home. Grace moved past him with quiet confidence, her presence transforming the sterile medical room into something that felt almost sacred. "Good afternoon, my sweet boys," she said softly, kneeling beside their chairs. Neither child startled at her voice. They knew it the way flowers know sunlight. Michael watched from his position near the door, hands in his pockets, feeling awkward and enormous and utterly out of place. This was his house. These were his sons. And yet he felt like a stranger witnessing something intimate and holy. "Mr. Rodriguez is going to sit with us today," Grace continued, her hands gently adjusting Jamie's blanket. "Isn't that wonderful? Your papa wants to spend time with you." Jamie's eyes shifted. Not much, just a slight movement, but definitely toward Michael. Jerry followed his brother's gaze. "Come closer, sir," Grace encouraged, her voice gentle but firm. "They can't see you well from way over there." Michael took 3 steps forward, then hesitated. He'd been in this room countless times, but always standing, always at a distance, always checking with nurses about medical updates, but never this. Never sitting at their level, never really being present. "Here." Grace patted the floor beside her. "Sit down." "On the floor?" The question came out before he could stop it, and he immediately felt foolish. He wore a $3,000 suit and hesitated to sit on his own carpet. "Yes, sir. On the floor." There was no judgment in Grace's tone, just patient instruction. That's where their world is. If you want to be part of it, you have to meet them where they are. Michael lowered himself awkwardly to the carpet, his long legs folding, his back against the wall. From this angle, everything looked different. The room was bigger. The ceiling seemed impossibly far away. This was how his son saw the world from below, looking up, dependent on others for everything. "Good," Grace said warmly. "Now just be still for a moment. Let them get used to you being here." The silence stretched. Michael's instinct was to fill it, to talk, to ask questions, to do something. But Grace's presence was so calm, so certain, that he forced himself to wait. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute, Jerry's head turned slightly toward him. "He's looking at you," Grace whispered. "Talk to him. Tell him about your day." "My day?" Michael's voice came out rough. I was in meetings, conference calls, board presentations." The words felt hollow, even as he said them. "Tell him what you saw on the way home," Grace prompted. "What the sky looked like. What you thought about. Anything real." Michael swallowed hard. "The sky," he started, then stopped. When was the last time he'd actually looked at the sky? The sky was gray today. Heavy clouds. It looked like it might storm, but it never did. Just stayed gray all day. Jamie made a small sound. Not a word, just a soft exhalation. "He's listening," Grace said. "Keep going." "I saw a hawk," Michael continued, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. "On the drive home. It was perched on a fence post by the road. Beautiful bird. Made me think of..." He paused. "Made me think of your mother. She loved birds. Used to point them out all the time." His voice cracked. "She would have taught you all their names." Jerry's fingers twitched. Grace noticed immediately. He responded to that. "To your emotion. They can feel it, Mr. Rodriguez. They know when you're being real with them." Michael blinked against the burning in his eyes. He looked at his sons, really looked at them. Not at their limitations, or their medical equipment, or the tragedy of their condition, just at them. Two little boys, with Melissa's eyes and his nose, and expressions he'd never taken time to learn. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I haven't been here. I thought giving you the best care was enough. I thought money could fix everything." A tear escaped, rolling down his cheek. "But I was wrong. I've been so wrong." Grace reached out and gently touched his hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." "I don't know what to do," Michael admitted, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to reach them like you do." "Let me show you something." Grace stood and walked to the bookshelf. She pulled out that brown leather notebook, the one Michael had seen in glimpses but never examined closely. "I found this behind the shelf. It's Melissa's." Michael's breath caught. "What?" She left notes, messages, songs. Grace opened the book carefully, holding it like the treasure it was. "She knew, Mr. Rodriguez. Somehow, she knew you'd need this." With trembling hands, Michael took the notebook. The familiar handwriting hit him like a punch to the gut. He could almost hear Melissa's voice as he read her words. March 15th. 6 months pregnant. I felt them kicking today during the sonogram. The tech said they were responding to my voice. I've been singing to them every night. Made up a lullaby. I'll write it down just in case. The pages blurred as tears filled his eyes. Here was his wife, alive in ink and paper, speaking to him across the void of death. He turned more pages, drinking in every word. April 2nd, Michael is worried. I can see it in his eyes. He keeps asking the doctors questions, making backup plans, trying to control every variable. That's how he loves, by protecting, by providing. But I wish he understood that love isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up, even when you don't. Michael's chest heaved. She'd known him so well, seen straight through to his heart. "There's more," Grace said softly. She turned to a page near the end. "Read this part. April 20th, I'm scared. I don't want to be, but I am. I keep having this feeling that something might go wrong. The nurses at work tell me I'm being paranoid, occupational hazard of being a pediatric nurse. But just in case, I want to write this down. To whoever takes care of my boys if I'm not here. They will understand more than people give them credit for. They will feel more than they can express. Talk to them, sing to them, love them without conditions or expectations. Don't measure them against what they should be doing. See them for who they are. Love can reach them even when words cannot. Tell them I love them before they took their first breath. Tell them I'm still with them in every sunrise, every bird song, every moment of unexpected joy. Tell them their father loves them more than life itself, even if he doesn't know how to show it. And tell Michael to forgive himself for whatever he thinks he did wrong, for whatever he couldn't prevent. None of it was his fault. Life is what it is. All we can do is love each other through it." Michael couldn't read anymore. The notebook slipped from his hands as his whole body shook with sobs he'd held back for 2 years. Grace picked up the notebook and set it aside, then simply sat beside him, one hand on his shoulder. "She knew," Michael choked out. "She knew she might not make it. She left me a map and I never. You're reading it now," Grace said gently. "You're here now. That's what she'd want." "Read me the song," Michael said suddenly, desperately. "The lullaby she wrote. I need to hear it." Grace retrieved the notebook and found the page. She began to sing, her voice clear and sweet. "Hush now, my darlings. Mama's voice is near. Even in darkness, you'll know I'm here. In every whisper of wind, every ray of sun, my love surrounds you, my precious ones." As she sang, something miraculous happened. Both Jerry and Jamie turned their heads toward the sound. Their mouths moved, struggling to form sounds. "Ma," Jamie breathed. Ma," Jerry echoed. Michael's eyes widened. They're singing along?" "They're trying," Grace confirmed, her own eyes shining with tears. "They've heard this song from me almost every day. They know it. It connects them to their mother." Michael moved closer to his sons, his heart thundering. Can I try?" Grace handed him the notebook. "Of course." His voice was rough, unpracticed, but he sang the words his wife had written for the children she'd never hold. "Dream sweet dreams. I'll keep you warm and safe. Through every trial, every test you face, you are loved beyond all measure and time. Forever you're hers, forever you're mine." Something in Jamie's face changed. A tension released. His small hand lifted trembling, uncertain, and moved toward Michael's voice. "Papa," Michael whispered, placing his hand where Jamie could reach it. "Say, Papa." Jamie's mouth worked. No sound came, but the effort was there. The intention, the connection. Michael gathered his sons as close as their fragile bodies allowed, the three of them forming a small circle on the nursery floor. Grace stood quietly, giving them space, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," Michael said to her, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing them, for not giving up, for finding her words and bringing her back to us." "She never left," Grace said softly. "She was here all along. You just needed to remember how to feel her." That evening, after the nurses had settled the boys for sleep, Michael asked Grace to stay for a moment. They stood by the window, watching the last light fade from the Texas sky. "I want to try something," he said. "Starting tomorrow, I want to spend 2 hours every day with them. No nurses, no distractions, just us. Will you teach me? Show me what you do?" Grace smiled. "I'd be honored, Mr. Rodriguez. Call me Michael," he said quietly. "You've earned it." As Grace left the nursery that night, Michael stayed behind. He pulled Melissa's notebook close and read every word, every note, every message she'd left like breadcrumbs leading him home. Outside, stars broke through the clouds. Inside, a father began to find his way back to his sons. And in the space between heartbeats, love did what medicine couldn't. It began to heal. I have to pause here and ask you something directly. How many of you have tears in your eyes right now? If this story is touching your heart, I need you to do 3 things. First, to hit that subscribe button. These stories need to reach more people who need hope. Second, rate this story in the comments on a scale of 1 to 10. Third, tell me where you're watching from. Your engagement helps this message of love and healing spread to every corner of the world. Now, let's see what happens when everything is put to the test. The storm rolled in 3 days later, dark and violent. The kind that makes the sky turn green and the air feel electric. Michael had spent those 3 days learning to be a father, the kind who sat on floors and read picture books and didn't worry about wrinkled suits or messy hands. It was hard. God, it was harder than any business negotiation he'd ever navigated. His sons couldn't tell him what they needed. They couldn't smile easily, or hug back, or give him the clear feedback his analytical mind craved. But Grace had taught him to read the subtle language of their bodies. A relaxed shoulder here, a focused gaze there, the slight lean toward comfort, the pull away from discomfort. You're learning their language. Grace had told him on day 2, when he'd successfully calmed Jerry through a moment of distress. That's what parenting is. Translation, you're becoming fluent in them. Now, as thunder rumbled across the estate and the first fat raindrops began to fall, Michael was alone with his sons for the first time since Grace had started teaching him. She'd requested the evening off, something about a medical appointment, and the day nurses had already left for the night. It was just Michael and the boys. Jamie started to whimper as the storm intensified. His small body tensed, his face crumpling in fear. Lightning flashed, illuminating the nursery in stark white light, followed immediately by a crack of thunder so loud it rattled the windows. Both boys cried out actual sounds, not just whimpers, but frightened vocalizations that pierced Michael's heart. "It's okay," he said, moving quickly to kneel between their chairs. "It's just a storm. You're safe. Papa's here." But they weren't calming. Jamie's breathing was becoming rapid, panicked. Jerry's face was red, his mouth open in a silent scream. What would Grace do? Michael's mind raced. She wouldn't panic. She'd ground them somehow, make them feel safe. The lullaby. Melissa's lullaby. Michael's voice was shaky at first, competing with the thunder. "Hush now, my darlings. Mama's voice is near." Jamie's crying lessened slightly. Encouraged, Michael sang louder. "Even in darkness, you'll know I'm here." He moved closer, placing one hand on each boy's chest, letting them feel his presence, his warmth, his heartbeat. In every whisper of wind, every ray of sun. Jerry's body relaxed incrementally. His breathing slowed. "My love surrounds you, my precious ones." Michael sang through the storm, verse after verse, making up words when he couldn't remember Melissa's, pouring everything he had into reaching his sons through their fear. The thunder boomed. The rain lashed against the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then held. Gradually, miraculously, the boys calmed. Their breathing steadied. Their faces relaxed. And then, "Pa!" Jamie whispered. Michael stopped singing. His heart stopped beating. "What did you say?" "Pa, Pa." It was barely audible, broken and imperfect, but unmistakable. "Papa!" Jerry echoed, his version even rougher, but just as real. Michael's vision blurred. "Yes, yes, I'm Papa. I'm here. I'm right here." He gathered them both close, careful of their fragile bones, and held them as lightning continued to flash and thunder rolled across the sky. "I've got you," he whispered into their hair. "I will always have you. Always." The door opened quietly. Grace stood there, soaked from the rain. Her medical appointment apparently forgotten. She'd come back. She'd known somehow that this was going to be the night. "Grace!" Michael looked up, his face wet with tears. "They called me Papa, both of them." She smiled, but it was bittersweet. "I know. I heard from the hallway. I wanted to give you that moment alone with them." "You came back," he said, understanding dawning. "There was no appointment. You left so we'd be alone. So they'd call for me. They needed to know you'd be there," Grace said simply. "And you needed to know you could be." She walked into the room, pulling off her wet jacket. "I brought something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device, a modified communication board with large buttons. "What's that?" Michael asked. "It's an AAC device, Augmentative and Alternative Communication. I've been researching." She sat down beside them. "The boys might not ever speak perfectly, but they can communicate. With help, with technology, with the right support, they've proven they understand language. Now we give them tools to use it." She pressed one of the buttons. A computerized voice said, "I love you." Jamie's eyes widened. He looked at the device, then at Grace, then at Michael. "Watch," Grace said. She took Jamie's hand and guided it to hover over the buttons. "When you want to tell your Papa you love him, you touch here." She helped him press the button. "I love you," the device said. Michael broke down completely. "I love you too," he sobbed. "I love you so much." Grace moved to Jerry, showing him the same button. "Your turn, sweetheart." Jerry's hand trembled as it moved toward the device. It took 3 tries, but finally he pressed it successfully. "I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you," Michael repeated like a prayer, holding his sons as the storm raged outside and healing raged within. They stayed there for hours, Grace teaching both Michael and the boys how to use the device. More buttons. Hungry, tired, scared, happy, more, please. Simple words that opened worlds. As the storm finally began to fade, moving east across the plains, Grace stood to leave. "Wait," Michael said. "Don't go yet. I need to tell you something." She turned, waiting. "A letter came today. For you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "From Dallas Medical Therapy Center. They're offering you a position, head of their pediatric communication therapy department. I saw it on Mrs. Chen's desk. She'd signed for it." Grace's face went carefully neutral. "I see. It's a prestigious position," Michael continued. "More money than I'm paying you. Benefits? Your own office. You'd be working with dozens of children instead of just 2. He paused. "You should take it." "Should I?" Grace's voice was quiet. "I can't ask you to stay," Michael said, even as his heart screamed the opposite. "You're meant for more than cleaning houses. You have a gift, Grace. A real gift for helping children. You could change so many lives." "I'm already changing lives," she said softly. "I know. But, Mr. Rodriguez, Michael." She walked back and knelt beside him. "When I took this job, I was running from something. A loss I couldn't face. A dream that had died. I came here to disappear. But these boys..." She looked at Jerry and Jamie with infinite tenderness. "They didn't let me disappear. They made me visible again. They gave me purpose. They gave me a family. But your career is important, was important," she smiled. "But love is more important. Presence is more important. I told you once that my mother taught me love is what we give, not what we get. Well, I'm giving it here, and getting far more than I ever expected in return." Michael's throat tightened. "Are you saying..." "I'm saying I'll write them a very polite letter declining their offer." She reached out and pressed the "I love you" button on the device. "Because I'm already exactly where I need to be." The boys had fallen asleep, exhausted from the storm and the emotional breakthrough. Grace covered them with soft blankets while Michael watched, his heart so full it hurt. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for seeing them, for teaching me to see them, for bringing Melissa back to us in ways I didn't know were possible." "She never left," Grace said again. "She's in every word they speak, every connection they make. She's in the love that fills this house." She looked directly at him. "And she's in you, when you let yourself be present, when you let yourself be imperfect, when you let yourself be human." That night, after Grace had gone to her quarters and the house had fallen quiet, Michael sat alone in his office. But this time, instead of working, instead of hiding behind spreadsheets and conference calls, he opened Melissa's notebook one more time. He read until dawn, learning about the woman he'd loved but never fully appreciated, learning about the mother who'd prepared for the worst while hoping for the best, learning about love that transcends death, about legacies written in lullabies, about the power of showing up even when, especially when, you don't have all the answers. As the sun rose over Texas, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Michael made a decision, not just for his sons, but for himself. He was done running from grief, done hiding from life, done trying to control everything. It was time to simply be present, to love imperfectly, to heal messily, to build not just a house of order and silence, but a home of music and laughter and life. It was time to really live again. Something powerful just happened in this story, and I hope you felt it. This is the moment everything changes, when we stop trying to control healing and just let love do its work. I want to know, which moment in this chapter moved you most? Comment below. And if you've been watching without subscribing, this is your reminder. Hit that button. Share this story. Let's spread this message of hope and healing to every corner of the world. One more chapter to go, and I promise you, it's going to show you what love looks like when it finally comes full circle. 3 weeks later, Michael Rodriguez stood in the garden his late wife had designed but never finished. The morning sun warmed his face. The air smelled of grass and blooming jasmine. And for the first time in 2 years, he heard the sound of his children laughing. Real, genuine, joyful laughter. Grace was pushing both boys on the wide adaptive swing he'd had installed, custom-made with proper supports for their bodies. She'd suggested it during one of their daily teaching sessions. "They need to feel movement," she'd said. To feel wind in their hair. To feel what it's like to fly. Now, Jerry and Jamie were doing exactly that. Their faces were lit with pure delight as the swing moved gently back and forth. The communication device sat in a weatherproof pouch attached to Jerry's chair, ready whenever he wanted to use it. But right now, no words were needed. Their happiness was written in every line of their small bodies. Michael approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt the moment. Grace saw him and smiled that warm, genuine smile that had become as familiar to him as his own reflection. "Good morning," she called out. "Someone woke up early. Couldn't sleep," Michael admitted. Too excited. Today was the day. The day he'd been planning for the past 3 weeks, ever since that storm night when everything had changed. "Boys, Papa's here," Grace announced. "Papa." Jerry pressed his communication button immediately. The word had become his favorite. "Hi, Papa," Jamie echoed, using his own device. Michael's heart still swelled, every single time. He'd never get used to it, the miracle of communication, the gift of connection, the simple, profound joy of hearing his children express themselves. "Hi, my guys," he said, kneeling in the grass beside the swing. "Having fun?" "Yes." Both buttons pressed in unison. Grace laughed. "We've been out here for an hour. I think they'd stay out here all day if they could." "Then maybe they should," Michael said. "Maybe we all should. It's a beautiful day, too beautiful to waste inside." He'd changed so much in these weeks. His suits stayed in the closet more often, replaced by jeans and casual shirts. His 18-hour workdays had become 8-hour ones. He'd promoted his COO and delegated ruthlessly, keeping only the work that truly needed his attention. His office at home had been converted into a proper playroom, filled with adaptive toys and communication tools, and soft places for his sons to explore. The mansion was different too. Staff had been given raises and permission to be human, to laugh in the hallways, to engage with the boys, to bring life into spaces that had been sterile for too long. Mrs. Chen had even been caught singing while she worked, something that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. Grace had done that. Not alone, Michael had done it too, and the boys most of all. But she'd been the catalyst, the spark that started the fire, the voice that called them all back to life, which made what he needed to do today both easier and harder. "Grace," he said, standing and brushing grass from his knees. "Can we talk? Boys, Papa and Grace need to have a grown-up conversation for a minute. We'll be right over there where you can see us." "Okay." Jamie's device chirped. They walked a short distance away, still in sight of the twins, and stood beneath an old oak tree. Grace looked at him curiously, waiting. Michael took a deep breath. "I need to ask you something important." "Of course. That job offer from Dallas Medical Therapy Center, the one you turned down." He paused. "They called me last week." Grace's eyebrows raised. "They called you?" "They wanted to know why you declined. I think they were hoping I'd convince you to accept. They said they'd double their initial offer." He pulled a paper from his pocket and handed it to her. "This is what they're willing to pay. It's more than I can compete with." Grace unfolded the paper, looked at the numbers, and handed it back. "It's generous, but I already gave them my answer. Grace, this is your career, your future. You could help hundreds of children instead of just 2. "I could," she agreed. "But I'd be helping them less deeply, spreading myself thin across many instead of pouring myself fully into a few." She looked back at Jerry and Jamie, swinging peacefully. "These boys don't just need therapy, Michael. They need family, consistency, love. You can't put that on a resume." "I know," Michael said quietly. "But I also know you deserve more than being called a maid, more than being seen as household staff. You're so much more than that." Grace smiled softly. "So change how you see me." Michael reached into his other pocket and pulled out a different envelope. "I already have. I want to offer you a different position, not as an employee, as family." Grace took the envelope slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a legal document, pages and pages of carefully drafted text. "I've established a trust," Michael explained, "for Jerry and Jamie's care. It's fully funded, managed by a board that includes me, our family attorney, and if you accept you as their legal guardian." Grace's eyes widened. "What?" "I'm not trying to replace Melissa," Michael said quickly. "No one could ever do that. But these boys need a mother figure. They need someone who will fight for them, advocate for them, love them unconditionally. They've already chosen you, Grace. They've been choosing you every day since you arrived." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. "Michael, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Be their guardian. Not their caregiver or their therapist or their maid. Their mother, in every way that matters." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Be the person Melissa would have chosen for them if she could have. Because I know, in my heart, I know she's the one who brought you here." Grace was crying openly now. "You really believe that?" "I found something else in her notebook," Michael said. "A page I missed at first, tucked in the very back. She'd written a prayer. She asked God that if she didn't make it, He'd send someone who would love her boys the way she would have. Someone who wouldn't see their limitations, but their potential. Someone who wouldn't give up." He took Grace's hands in his. "You're the answer to that prayer, Grace. I'm sure of it. So please, say yes. Stay with us. Not as staff, as family." Grace looked past him to the boys, still swinging, still happy, still waiting for the two most important people in their world to come back. She thought about the job offer, the prestige, the money, the career she'd once dreamed of. She thought about her mother, who'd taught her that love is what we give. And she thought about two little boys who'd given her purpose when she lost her way. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay. I'll be their guardian. Her voice broke. Their mother, in every way that matters." Michael pulled her into a hug, both of them crying, both of them laughing, both of them transformed by the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Papa! Grace!" Jerry's device called out. "Come back. We miss you," Jamie added. "The settin' better and one fort." They broke apart, wiping tears, and walked back to the boys hand in hand, not as employer and employee, not even as friends exactly, but as partners in love, united in their commitment to these two incredible children. Grace knelt beside the swing. "Boys, Papa and I need to tell you something important." Both boys focused on her immediately, their expressions alert. "I'm going to stay forever," Grace said simply. "I'm not just your caregiver anymore. I'm going to be your mama. Is that okay with you?" For a moment, there was silence. Then Jerry reached out his hand and pressed his communication button. "Love you." Jamie pressed his next. "Love you, Mama." Grace dissolved into tears again, gathering them both close. "I love you too, both of you, so much." Michael knelt beside them, his arms encircling all three. His family, broken and rebuilt, imperfect and beautiful, born from tragedy but raised on love. "Melissa," he whispered into the wind, "I hope you can see this. I hope you know. We're going to be okay. All of us. Because of you. Because of the love you left behind." The wind rustled through the oak tree's leaves, sounding almost like music, like a whisper of approval, like a mother's lullaby sung from somewhere just beyond sight. That afternoon, Michael made phone calls to lawyers, to the boys' doctors, to family and friends he'd pushed away in his grief. He told them the news. Grace Thompson was officially joining the family as legal guardian to Jerry and Jamie. There would be a small ceremony next month to make it official. That evening, Grace moved her belongings from the third-floor staff quarters to a proper bedroom in the family wing right next to the nursery, with a door connecting them, so she'd always be close. That night, all four of them sat together in the renovated playroom. Michael and Grace on the floor, the boys between them, as they read stories and sang songs and pressed communication buttons and laughed at silly jokes that weren't even funny. It was normal. Beautifully, perfectly normal. The kind of evening that happens in millions of homes around the world. Unremarkable, except to the people living it. Except this family had fought so hard for normal, had clawed their way back from grief and silence and loss, had learned that healing doesn't come from money or medicine or control, but from love freely given and gratefully received. As the boys drifted off to sleep in their cribs, Grace sang Melissa's lullaby one more time. Hush now, my darlings. Mama's voice is near. Even in darkness, you'll know I'm here. In every whisper of wind, every ray of sun, my love surrounds you, my precious ones. Michael joined in on the second verse, his voice blending with Grace's, both of them singing words written by a woman who'd known her time was limited but had filled it with love anyway. After the boys were asleep, Michael and Grace sat in the hallway outside the nursery, backs against the wall, shoulders touching companionably. "Thank you," Michael said quietly, "for seeing them, for seeing me, for not giving up when it would have been so much easier to just do your job and leave." "Thank you for letting me in," Grace replied, "for trusting me with your most precious treasures, for teaching me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the gentle sounds of children breathing, of a house at peace, of love finally finding its way home. In the years that followed, Jerry and Jamie would continue to progress. They'd never walk without assistance, never speak perfectly clearly, never be what the world called normal. But they'd communicate through technology and touch and the language of love that transcends words. They'd go to school, special education with Grace, fighting fiercely for every accommodation they needed. They'd make friends, tell jokes, express opinions, live full lives, rich with meaning. Michael would write a book about his journey, donating all proceeds to research for children with disabilities. He'd become an advocate, using his platform and wealth to push for better support systems, better understanding, better love for children who needed it most. Grace would eventually go back to school, getting her master's degree in speech therapy, but she'd never leave the boys. She'd build her practice around them, working from home, always available, always present. She'd become the mother Melissa had prayed for, the guardian angel the boys needed, the partner Michael had never expected but couldn't imagine life without. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the Texas sky turned pink and gold, they'd all sit in the garden together, Michael, Grace, Jerry, and Jamie, and they'd feel it. That presence, that warmth, the echo of a love that had died but never ended, that had transformed into something new and beautiful and eternal. Melissa's love, still reaching them, still healing them, still teaching them what it means to be a family. Dear friends, we've reached the end of this journey together. But before you go, I need something from you. If this story touched your heart, if it made you cry, made you think, made you believe in the power of love to heal impossible wounds, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel. These stories need to reach everyone who's struggling, everyone who's lost hope, everyone who needs to be reminded that love wins. Second, rate this story in the comments. Give me a number from 1 to 10. Tell me what you felt. Tell me what it meant to you. Third, and most importantly, tell me where you're watching from. Are you in Lagos, London, Los Angeles, Mumbai, Manila? Every location matters. Every voice counts. Every heart that connects with this message adds to its power. Because that's what this story is really about. The power of presence. The miracle of showing up. The truth that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from credentials or wealth or status, but from simple, patient, unconditional love. Michael learned that. Grace embodied it. Jerry and Jamie proved it. Now it's your turn. Take this lesson out into your world. See the invisible people. Love the ones everyone else has given up on. Show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And remember, you don't need to be perfect to make a difference. You just need to be present. Thank you for letting me share this story with you. Until next time, keep your hearts open, keep loving fiercely, and never stop believing in the power of impossible miracles. They happen every single day,